Okay, Cassie and Holly, welcome to the Silver Falls School District, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I will turn this time over to you.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here. Cassie, if you could change the slide. I am Holly Dalton. I'm the Senior Manager of Social, Emotional, and Early Learning at the WESD.
And I'm Cassie Stafford, licensed clinical social worker and Senior Manager of the Mental Health and Behavior at Willamette ESD.
And we're so excited to be here with all of you. And thank you for welcoming us. We're here to support you and your students as we enter this school year. So what we want you to do is just start when breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. One more time, breathe in and breathe out. We know that you have a lot of anxiety and stress, maybe some excitement as we are anticipating students arriving in the next few days. When we take the pause and breathe, it helps us to shift our minds and our emotions into a relaxing state. So what I'd like us to do is, I hope everybody is able to have some sort of technology. So you should be able to, because you have posted your thing in the chat. So we are going to navigate. I'm having trouble copying. Okay, I got it. To the following link. And you have an X and Y axis. So I'm going to ask you how you're feeling today. On the bottom, the X axis from left to right is your pleasantness. So it goes from unpleasant on the left-hand side in the blue to pleasant, which is green. And then your energy level on the Y axis, or up and down, from feeling unpleasant on the bottom to, feeling low energy on the bottom to high energy on the top. So if you click on the link in the chat, you hover over the word, the quadrant that best describes where you're feeling. And then you click on the word that describes most, that resonates with you. And then we will share. And this is completely anonymous. So no one will know who you are.
Completely anonymous with our 3 participants.
Good point, Jean.
That's a good point. But we won't know which
I
one.
could log in with my other Google apps and pretend to be other people.
But we won't know we won't know exactly who you are.
I was assuming this one would be like the busiest one because I'm too busy for the next one you guys are doing. So I'm glad I selected this one.
Well, welcome, Sarah.
We'll just give it a couple more minutes.
Holly, are you able to share the one where it kind of shows? Because I think I'm showing.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. Why isn't it showing? But
yeah, because
yeah.
it's showing what I can do. So I'm going to say I am grateful.
So Cassie, you're giving yourself away.
I know. I'm not anonymous on this one. I just decided to put myself out
I
there.
don't mind sharing where I'm at. So,
Well, I appreciate that, but I will hang on a second. I will open it.
We'll let Holly share that in her screen.
Well, I have 0 participants. I'm having technology issues like always. Okay, let's try one more time. Here we go. So this is just a quick way to check in with people, and all emotions. I told you I'm having trouble with technology.
Daniel, we need your Zen to help us here.
All emotions are valid emotions, apparently. And so we would ask somebody if they wanted to shift. So I noticed that there was somebody in the red. So wanting to know if that person wants to shift or not. And that is entirely up to that individual. Let's see if we can go to the
All right, we will
next
go ahead
slide.
and share.
Since it has disappeared.
Okay. So like Holly said, that's a nice check-in. It's a mood meter option. Really nice way to check in with folks. So, all right.
So our goals today are to develop an awareness of ACEs and the effects on students and staff, to have an understanding of what it means to be trauma sensitive, to increase our social emotional skills for students and staff, to build more connections, and to figure out how all these pieces work together to create equitable and optimal learning environments for all students in Silver Falls.
I have
Yeah.
to interrupt for a sec.
Go ahead.
I think I'm in the wrong session.
Which session did you
Okay.
think you were in?
Increasing student engagement.
Yeah, this is.
Oh my gosh.
This is, I think you're in the
This is.
right one. Yeah. But these are part of what we're talking about in terms of student engagement. So we'll
Okay,
be
so we
sort
are
of-
we're talking about increasing student engagement, but we're also talking about, because wasn't there another one about mental health too, or is this it? One and the same?
One and the same.
Okay.
So you're good. So, and
Okay.
because it's a small group, feel free to pop things in the chat, ask questions. It's sort of going to flow where I'm going to talk a little bit at the beginning, a little bit more so, and then Holly's going to take over and kind of round things out. But it doesn't mean at any point in time we can't sort of engage in a conversation around what would be relevant to you. So just in terms of one of the things that we want to really highlight is this integrated model of mental health that ODE has put forth. So go ahead and raise your hand or do like a thumbs up symbol if you've ever seen this before. Okay, so some have. Okay, great, most have. Okay, excellent. So we're looking at how we can improve the whole health or mental health of all students by being trauma-informed, social-emotional learning driven, equity-centered, and strength-based. And so that's our guiding framework. So in terms of trauma-informed, lots of people have participated in various different trainings around trauma-informed. And so there's some concepts and ideas that people have learned or sort of have developed over time. So we're going to do like a true false. And there's 4 things I'm going to put up on the screen, and you're going to either use thumbs up, thumbs down. You can use your actual thumb, or you can use the visual option on your computer. So there are no rules or accountability, and kids can get away with misbehavior if you are trauma informed. True or false? Yeah, good. I like that X there, Heather. Good job. And Jean, yep, false. And in the presentation, I'm going to kind of dispel, I'm not sure if that's the right word. I am going to work through some of these myths, okay, or some of these challenges. Trauma-informed schools have lower academic expectations. We're not going to push these kids very hard. Nice, you guys are experts. That is false. Trauma-informed schools is something social workers do. Only the mental health people take care of it. Yeah, you guys are rock stars. To be trauma-informed, to be a trauma-informed school, we don't have to roll out a new initiative or program. true. You're right. You do not have to roll out a brand new initiative or program. And we're gonna look at all of these things a little bit closer. So in terms of adverse childhood experiences, again, raise your hand if you've heard of adverse childhood experiences before. Okay, great. So just as a quick review, a reminder, it was a study done in the 90s and looked at 10 specific categories of adverse childhood experiences and the effects on our health over time. If you're interested in getting an in-depth information on that, Nadine Burke-Harris, physician, researcher, and advocate, has done a wonderful TED Talk that I linked in this presentation. So we'll make sure you get that access to that. Also know that as we talk about being trauma informed in this presentation, there is the potential for you to reflect on some experiences that you may have had, or you know of other people who have had those experiences. I encourage you not to spend time in this presentation delving into that. This is more kind of looking at from the lens of what students might experience and then how we might be able to support them. If you do feel yourself activated or triggered, feel free to turn off your camera, check in with someone, or reach out in the chat to touch base. We certainly don't want anyone feeling unsafe or uncomfortable having discussed some of these topics. We won't be going in depth in details of any of these topics, nor should we really be doing that with students on a regular basis. It's never necessary to know the details of someone's trauma history. It just isn't. As a clinical social worker, it wasn't always necessary for me when I was one-on-one with students even to do that. It's more about helping the student know how to respond when they're feeling activated. So going back to the first myth that we talked about, or one of the myths that was on the list, trauma-informed schools are something social workers and school counselors do. So it is something that folks in your building, in your district, might have some expertise and some professionals that might be able to enhance. But really, in schools, the relationship that matters the most is between you and the student. Okay, so I could have all the credentials in the world and come into your building and not be able to have the same amount of effect and support of your student as you might. So it's just something to remember. Okay. And whoops, let's see. Okay. Okay. Are you guys all seeing that web? Okay. I think my slides were a little off on what I was doing. Okay. So I want you to know, I found the least creepy spider web that I could find with a piece of turquoise in the middle, because turquoise is healing. And so I thought this was kind of a cool picture. But so children are wrapped in what I like to think about as a therapeutic web. And I got this from a new book that's out. Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry wrote a book called What Happened to You? And it kind of is a conversation between the two of them. So check it out if you can. But the concept is that a child is supported by a strong social fabric. They might move through their own healing process naturally using people around them as needed. Sometimes when we force someone into therapy with a stranger, that makes things a little bit worse. Not to say we don't make referrals, but what I want to really point out to you is you're not a therapist, but you play an important role and are valuable in being therapeutic. Okay, so that brings us to what's therapy versus being therapeutic, right? So to be therapeutic, it means to have a positive effect on the body and mind. Can you either unmute or in the chat just point out what are some things that are therapeutic to you? Like for me, it's like going to the beach, it's therapeutic.
I'm all about quiet time some days. Do you have any-
Yeah, walking, water, nature, quiet time.
Being
All
in
the-
nature, dog,
Yeah.
Hanging
Yeah.
out with your dog?
and
mhm.
my cats too, the petting the cat.
Yeah, my son's goes to horse therapy and they have these 4 kittens And I sat there the whole time petting a kitten while it was just amazing. It was so therapeutic, right? So being a therapeutic influence on a child is something that we can do in our positions at school. Something that we don't want to do is engage in clinical practices that might be more geared to what someone would engage in with therapy. And if you don't know what that is, great, because you don't need to know, right? And then you won't engage in it. But essentially, we want to be a support to students, and just by being in relationship with them, we are. Okay. So this visual shows, do you see the visual? There we go. This visual shows people that can be part of a student's therapeutic web. Okay. So the various different roles, Holly, can you remind me? I didn't double check in the chat the roles of the various different people, or you can unmute yourselves and let me know what your role is in the school.
Teacher.
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 Okay.
Youth transition specialist, and I'm new to the position.
Awesome. Welcome.
ELD assistant.
Okay. So we all have different roles. You can see up here a pet, friends, teacher, can all be part of the therapeutic web for a child. Okay. All right. So this slide talks really about the effects of trauma on the brain. Okay. When we experience stress, much like we experienced over the last 2 years, right? Going on 3 years with COVID, our brain structure actually starts mapping things a little bit differently. Okay. And neuroscience tells us that we can actually rebuild some of those neural pathways in a positive way, even if we've developed them in a stressful way. Now, experiencing a stressful event in an older state is different than when you're younger. Ages, the earlier years, things are still developing in your brain. And it would be interesting to see younger kids and their experience with masks, for example, and how that impacts their concept of things like reading facial expressions and things like that. There's lots of things to think about as we move forward. But it's important to recognize that being trauma-informed doesn't mean that you reduce your academic expectations indefinitely. What it means is that sometimes that children and people who have experienced traumatic situations and a lot of high stress, they require a sense of safety to be able to access their learning brain. And once the safety is established, then learning happens faster. Okay. So this is a little visual of the brain, right? Our brains develop from the bottom up. First, we have our survival brain. It's our brain stem. I like to call it the lizard brain, the reptilian brain down there. Next, we have the feeling brain. And again, it scaffolds and develops up. So as little ones, we start with that brainstem and move up to our learning brain. And then we get to our learning brain or our wizard brain. Okay, so lizard brain and wizard brain. And those are kind of some sort of fun ways to think about this in terms of what we experience. Okay, so when someone is experiencing stress, they go down into their survival or their lizard brain. Okay, so for example, if a young child is activated and they're very stressed out, something feels unsafe to them. They're in their brainstem and they might have sensory needs that they don't need if they can access the higher parts of their brain. Okay, so maybe they, a fidget tool works really well, or pressure, kind of a weighted vest, things like that work well. But once they're regulated, those things don't really matter. Okay, so that gives you sort of an example of how we can actually experience different things in the different parts of our brain. Okay, 3 things need to be accomplished before a child can come back online once they're activated, or an adult, for that matter. Doesn't have to just be a child. So if a child or an adult, anyone that you interact with isn't regulated, is down in their lizard brain, we need to help them regulate. Okay, so we need to reach them with calm voice. We need to get down to their level, model what we want to see from them. Okay, once we regulate and they can regulate a little bit better, then we can use our relationship to relate to them and finally help them get to the point where they can get back online and be available for learning. Okay, if we try to go straight to the reasoning and learning right away without having established the safety, then often we're forcing our children to try to learn in the lizard brain, which isn't as effective as if they can get to the other parts of their brain. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions on this? Okay.
Cassie, can I just,
Yeah.
so we often think this as little children, but so when someone is activated in their lizard brain, it looks different as a young adult or an adult. It could look like storming out of a room, stomping, right? Those types of things. It still happens to adults as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have certainly been in my lizard brain over the last, 18 months, at different points in time. So just to kind of talk about the science of it real quick, is that when we are in our lizard brain, we are potentially in fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so let me see if I can get this to pop up. Okay, there we go. All right, so fight or flight or freeze. So those are the three. Many people have heard of fight or flight, but not freeze. So we'll talk about that. So when fight or flight happens, the sympathetic nervous system is activated. And that causes us to either fight something or run away from something. Okay. If we have an over aroused sympathetic nervous system, something is too much, that causes like a shutdown. And that's when you see the freeze, head shut down, everything shut down. Both involve hormone, cortisol, which is a stress hormone that goes up in your body. So there's science behind this, right? And so that cortisol helps you stay in that lizard survival brain. And what we need to do is help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which then infuses oxytocin, which decreases that cortisol level. So the science behind what you're doing when you're speaking calmly, when you're looking at a student, whether it's a high school student or an elementary school student, and really trying to connect with them in a calm way, that is changing the science in their brain so that then they could access the higher levels of their brain. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. All right, so myth that there are no rules and kids can get away with misbehavior. Has anyone heard this before in working with a child who maybe has some trauma history? That Sarah, have you heard of something?
I have a special needs son too, and so he'll always use it as an excuse. And I say, I understand you have this oppositional values explosive disorder, but it's your job to try to do your best because you're going to have this forever. So we'll try to say, well, it's what I have going on. You're right, it is what you have going on, but there's also other things. So.
Right. And that's where you as the parent use your relationship to continue to push your is it your son? Push your son to kind of push himself outside that comfort zone, right? And so that is something that is important to know, that kids who get activated aren't incapable of pushing themselves. But until you have a relationship established with them, you can't really get to that point where you can do that without having some potentially behavioral repercussions. Okay. Okay. All right. So a couple of things that we want to do is think about schools, think about a paradigm shift. Okay. So, whoops, let's see, there we go. What we want to do is we want to center on the development of our relationship with students. Okay. So when we think about students in terms of what's wrong with them, like, why are they acting like this? That's going to be one lens that we can look at a child through. But when we think about, okay, what happened to them that caused them to think that this reaction was okay or acceptable or something that, you know, that they do, how did they get to that point? So really kind of shifting our thinking to, instead of what's wrong with them, what happened to them. I also encourage you to think about, you hear the term attention seeking thrown around a lot. And I want you to kind of think about that as connection seeking, right? So a student who might be engaging in behavior that's sort of loud or taking the attention of others, think about ways that you can build some connection with that student proactively so that maybe they won't express that need in that way. Let's see, thinking about time in versus time out. Again, lots of times we exclude kids as a consequence from different things. How can we build in opportunities for relationship development, even if we're trying to help a student understand that they made a poor choice or a decision impacted others, okay? Also thinking about, instead of they won't do it, they're manipulative, they are doing this because they don't like me. Think about it in terms of a skill deficit. When we think of a child who has challenges in learning math, right? They, you know, try, but it's just not working. We don't just say, well, you can do it, just try harder. We say, okay, we're going to give you some interventions. We're going to do some things with you and help you learn the skills of math. It's the same way with social, emotional, you know, challenges. If we think about it as this is a skill they haven't built yet, they haven't built the ability to stay calm when someone tells them no, or to stay calm when a peer is, you know, bugging them, that kind of thing, then it helps us be more proactive with a student. Okay. And then last, or instead of, or, and instead of or. So it goes back to those expectations. I can understand what students have gone through and I can still hold them accountable, rather than thinking I'm just going to sort of treat them with kid gloves and really help them through everything and hold their hand through everything. That's not what kids need. Okay. What they need is to have a strong relationship and hold them accountable to what we want them to learn. Okay. So this one, what are you already doing, given what you've heard so far in this presentation, what you know about being trauma informed? Can you unmute yourself and tell me what is something that you're already doing that is probably trauma informed, or that you've seen somebody else do?
So inside of my classroom, I do a lot of conscious discipline, even though our platform is PBIS, because it really opens up the kids to start self-regulating themselves and being aware of how those 3 brain states work. And so in our SEL meetings in the morning, they get to learn about the brain state and what that means. So giving the information that you're giving to us to them, so they're aware of it and how it works, is really helpful. And then in the classroom, they get choices. So feel free to do this for homework, or feel free to do it now, but you know, this job is, you get to do this job afterwards. So, and it makes it a whole lot easier because it's not my buck I have to pass. They're responsible for it.
What grade do you teach?
4 or 5.
4 or 5. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. I explained the brain to 3rd graders, 2nd graders, 1st graders, right? And it's amazing once they can grasp that there's something physical going on in the brain, that they can actually begin to kind of work with it. So.
Right. And those different powers that they have, like they have the power of choice, and no one makes you angry. You choose to be angry. So just things like that.
Yeah. Great. Holly, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's great, Holly. I'm just going to say thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Other people want to share things that they know of or that they participate in that are trauma informed.
So
Okay.
Sarah put in the chat,
Oh, thank you.
Cassie, finding the connection between students and you, and that's critical. That's key. So nicely done.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, and I loved hearing what Holly said in terms of empowerment, choices, regular meetings. Holly Dalton is going to talk about those things too a little bit later in the presentation about how those are signature social emotional learning strategies. So that's great. Okay. So one thing that's really important to recognize is that the elements of being trauma informed don't just help those kids that have come from backgrounds or situations that are high stress. It helps everybody. And so you probably won't be surprised to see these different things on the screen, but how do you incorporate structure and routine in ways in your classroom or in the school setting and the various positions that you do?
I usually have seating arrangements. I teach music, so I have the classes come in, and so I find that helps a little bit, because then the idea of choosing where to sit, which is fun for some kids, but sort of worrisome for others.
Mhm.
And then also I find that the kids that tend to disrupt being separated actually brings more calmness to the rest of the kids, where they're always sort of worried about the disrupting kids. Just by putting a seating chart, you can kind of. And then another thing I do is little things like every Friday we have student of the day, and it's very brief, very minimal, but it's like, if I forget that, they're like, who's student of the day, and it's like all they get to do is sit in a certain chair and then say a couple things about themselves, but like that becomes huge. Just this little thing, and God forbid I would ever forget somebody, so I have to keep very careful track of that, but they are on top of me if I forget that.
Great example. And I think you also highlight a point in the day that's challenging for all kids, but particularly for kids who have experienced some trauma, are transitions, right? And so to be able to know when you transition into the music room, you know exactly where to go, where to sit. There's not choice in that. Choice and voice is important in some ways, but then in those moments of transition and things, that structure and routine can be really calming and settling for people. So that's a great example. Predictability. You also mentioned predictability. They know that every Friday there's that event. So it's not a surprise. Things aren't changing every day in your classroom. Also with Holly talking about the SEL meetings. Assuming the kids know that when they come in, there's an SEL meeting that happens. And so that predictability is really valuable. Okay, connection, again, also mentioned in Jean's example of they've got this connection to you now. When you recognize them and you go through and you make sure that everyone gets recognized, that really feels good for them. So flexibility is sometimes hard when it's coupled with structure and routine. Does anyone have an example of what flexibility might look like while still holding structure and routine?
I will say that allowing them to use certain things like cell phone use, depending on what is it that they are working on. And I don't know different levels, but at the high school level, you're talking about more mature kids, right? So it is a little different. So we have to like treat them like the best way possible. So not to lose that connection that it's already built within, teacher or assistant or a friend, which I try to do it more as a friend, not to, not dividing, like I'm the teacher and you're the student. So no, So depending how they understand the message, I really try to make sure that they really trust me and they know that they can use the phone or not, depending on how they are progressing in their grades. Because I put all that in place when I try to connect with them. So
Right.
trust is big.
Huge. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Jose. Yeah. Yeah. And that flexibility of thinking, having expectations that people are engaging in the work, and that some students are in a position where they're mature enough to utilize their phone and still get their work done, right? Or be using it as a calculator or using it for the tool that it needs. And so not having our structures so limited that we can't be flexible in that.
Even to translate.
Translate, absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense, right? And sometimes helping our colleagues understand, those differences too, and needs for flexibility, because our colleagues come from different lenses in terms of what is okay and what isn't okay, but really talking through, this is why we need to be flexible with this student in this situation. So great conversation. Thank you. Let's see. Empowerment. Yeah, empowering people to have choice and voice in the classroom, be a participant. Any examples of empowerment that you have in your school and your buildings?
I guess I'll go again.
Thanks, Jose.
So what I try to do with my students is that sometimes well, actually not sometimes, but most of the time there is one student that, knows one thing more than others. So I try to, I look and try to find that student. And what I do, I just say, hey, can you help can you help your friend here? Or if you want to do it on the board so everybody can see it and learn from it. So that gives them more confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, sometimes, because it used to happen to me, I used to understand more the explanation of one older student or, than teacher. So sorry, I got nothing against teachers.
No, it's okay.
Sometimes you need somebody else to explain things to you in a different way,
Mhm.
and you get it. It's like a click. So that empowers them, and
Absolutely.
that gives other students like, hey, if he can do it or if she can do it, I might be able to do so too. And I let them know, hey, you guys can do this.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jose. I love that. That peer modeling, that mentoring, is important. Sarah.
I think empowering, like I work with the special education students, letting them know that some of their disabilities are a superpower, like autism specifically. We have a student who got to be put at a grocery store. And by being there for a week, he mapped out exactly which time would be best to mop, exactly which time would be best to how to prepare for things. Like the things the average mind wouldn't really think about, but because of his superpower, right? And so that empowerment of different things is super helpful to let students know.
That just gave me chills. I love that. Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, great. So in terms of, what's important for your buildings and in your systems, so ensuring that you have an awareness of the locations or situations that, can be tricky spots or hot spots for kiddos. We already touched on transitions, that in the school at the beginning of the day, that transition elementary school might be from recess back into the classroom, those kinds of things. Also, making sure you understand your building or district process or procedure in terms of if you do have a student who maybe they disclose something to you about something that happened to them, make sure you're following those mandated reporter responsibilities. and making sure that if you have a process in place that you're following it. Okay. And if you don't know, go ahead and ask your supervisor, your direct supervisor, what is the process if a student is upset, or if I notice that, something happens for them, this math is a real trigger for them. Every time they go into math, they're having a meltdown. Might find that there might be a process that you have in place, or you help build one. Okay. And then also remembering that observation can be really, really useful. And so if you're in a situation where you can't quite figure out what's going on for a kiddo, spending some time kind of watching their interactions, noticing kind of what are the little things that are going on. One thing that I will point out is that smell is a really powerful trauma trigger that we don't often talk about. So, I know there's aromatherapies and things like that that people are trying in their classrooms and different things, but just be aware that smells, you think about, the smells that we had from maybe our grandparents cooking when we were children. Sometimes we get that whiff and we're like, whoa, right back in that. So that can also be the same for a perfume or a cologne or some scent that might be connected to a situation for a child that doesn't feel safe. And so noticing any of these different pieces can help you really understand a child better. So in terms of when a student is activated or triggered, when they're in that lizard brain, I really like to think about Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, "Be a thermostat, not a thermometer." Okay, so really thinking about maintain whatever comfortable degree you like. I like 70 degrees, right? I'm at 70 degrees. Student comes in and they are hot. They're at 95 degrees or they're at 20 degrees, shut down. I want to maintain my calm, my temperature by stopping myself and taking a deep breath and sort of taking inventory of what's going on. Okay, see if I can be, an observer and see what's happening. Then I really want to think about, do I have a relationship with this student? Am I their bus driver and I've developed a really good relationship with them and I see them first thing in the morning and I can help them co-regulate? Hey, nice to see you today. Thanks for coming on the bus. I really appreciate. So nice to see your smile. That in itself can bring someone down. If you don't have a relationship with a student and you're able to, find someone who does. We want kids to be able to regulate themselves. But when you think about babies can't regulate themselves. They need the adults around them. So if a child hasn't experienced safe, consistent adult in their life to help them co-regulate, modeling after what that adult is doing, then we need to do that, right? And we, in modeling that is sort of the gateway for them to develop self-regulation, okay? Nonverbal interventions are always best to start off with. Dim the lights, see if you can change something in the environment, remove the audience, those kinds of pieces. Verbal options, again, thinking about tone of voice, rate at which you're speaking and volume level, and try to slow those things down. And in rule of 5 is that when a child is highly escalated, anybody, an adult, anyone at any age is highly escalated, we can't process more than 5 words. So less talking is better. Help them get to a calm state. You can always deal with the consequence after or the expectation after. Reminding someone of a consequence of what's going to happen if they don't calm down in the moment generally never works. It hasn't worked with my kids. I don't know about yours, but something to remember for any of us. Yeah, so always remembering to kind of be a thermostat and not a thermometer. Okay, so Holly, is there anything that you want to kind of add before we take a quick break?
Or did you want to do this before we get to the break?
Yeah, we can do this real quick and then we'll jump into a break. So essentially what we talked about was the upper left quadrant of this picture, right? The trauma-informed component. And we're going to be jumping over to the top right, that social emotional learning driven, for the rest of the presentation, and pointing out that being equity centered and strength based is woven throughout. And so hopefully we'll touch on some of those pieces as well. But really, how does being trauma informed intersect with social emotional learning? That's kind of where we're jumping to next.
And I was thinking about Jean's comment about, being in the wrong place and thinking about, I thought this was about engagement. And so we typically think of engagement as a strategy. I'm going to do this engagement strategy and it's going to engage all learners. However, we need to think about the paradigm in a different way. I can engage students or adults if they're not feeling safe and secure. So this is the optimum way of making sure all your children feel connected and engaged. We can't, and I say this when we have blowouts, if students are blowing out, and that, as I said, looks different in kindergarten as it does in high school, we can't have them engage until they're regulated. So that's a point that I just wanted to make. So Jean, you're in the right place.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely.
And sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
We're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break. Get up and stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, bio break, and then we'll see you back here at 12:58.
All right. See you back in a few minutes.
Welcome back, Jose.
Yes, we are back.
Just give it another moment and for Sarah and Holly to come back.
Stress and buddy, not a good combination.
No, it's not a good combination.
That's a pain.
It is. It literally is. Literally. You're right. You're absolutely correct on that one. Speaking from experience.
Hello, I'm gonna jump. My student teacher is watching the rest of this, so she's really
Okay.
here. But I'm gonna jump onto another one because this is a review for me. Sorry.
Okay, and Sarah might be joining us back, and she might not be joining us back, but
I'm here. My camera's just off. I'm helping my son.
Okay, no worries. Hi, Sarah. We've all experienced varying levels of stress over the past year, and as our students are entering the building, they've all experienced a different amount of stress as well. And as Jose said, stress can be a real pain in the body, and that's absolutely right. The stress we actually feel in our body. So we're just going to watch this video.
Take a moment to consider what your students might be experiencing at home before they come to school. Here's Jalen on a typical morning. When Jalen hears his alarm going off, messages travel through his brain and body to speed up his heart rate and signal that it's time to get going. Most everyday activities, like getting out of bed and getting dressed, are managed by the parasympathetic or the rest and digest system. This system controls our heart rate and helps the body and brain function calmly. But when Jalen thinks or hears or sees something scary, the limbic center of his brain activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response that prepares the body for vigilance and action. The brain turns off the higher reasoning areas and instead locks in a focus on the threat. Then, the adrenal glands release the stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol does two things. In the brain, it locks in the memory of the scary event into the hippocampus so that we'll remember and react more quickly next time. And in the body, it releases stored energy so that the fight, flight, or freeze response can be sustained longer. Higher cortisol levels lead to higher insulin levels and lower blood sugar, which is why many people crave sugary, salty, fatty foods when they're stressed. Once the stress has passed, the parasympathetic nervous system calms the heart and relaxes the organs in the body. Communication between the thinking and feeling regions of the brain is restored. Stress can also be caused by just the memory of an event, such as an accident or a natural disaster. Even being a witness to a frightening event can create such a strong memory that anything that even reminds the child of the event, for example, hearing a car screech its tires, can create a similar stress response. Some of the most toxic stressors for children are the ones that come from loved ones. When the people closest to them are also the source of their pain, it's an especially confusing kind of danger. Chronic stressors like abuse, neglect, or a parent's mental illness can all be extremely harmful. There are other kinds of chronic stressors too, like poverty, bullying, racism, and harassment, that can have the same kinds of effects. The causes of stress vary, but what matters is how stress feels to the person. Sometimes stress can become chronic because painful thoughts and memories keep running around in our minds. This can lead a child to agonize and feel worthless and hopeless. A caring adult and learning emotion skills can help. When a child experiences too much stress without help, it can harm them for the rest of their lives. Early life stress compromises the development of the stress system, and the earlier that it happens, the worse is the impact. Research shows that early life stress can lead to adult health problems like diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. It can cause anxiety and depression, and it can undermine healthy relationships, achievement, and even occupational success. The good news, though, is that the earlier someone can intervene to help, the better chance a child can have for a bright future.
The good news is that through resilience, we can help to not eliminate the stressors, but we can help to get around those stressors or create proactive strategies for people to deal with those stressors. So I'm going to go back, and this is a couple of questions. So I want you to think about the last time you experienced stress. So what was the situation? How was your body feeling? How did you react? And what strategy did you use to help regulate your emotions? Does anyone feel comfortable sharing that?
You're asking everyone in education this the week before school starts during a pandemic.
It's a good one, Sarah. It's a really good one.
Situation right now
Yeah.
in education during an epidemic. How's your body feeling? I think personally with me, I'm going into a new position, and my new position is usually completely different. But because we are during this COVID, this is most of my interaction with my students now. So that's not the norm. So I'm struggling with that one. So I'd say my reaction wouldn't be very positive. And what strategy do you use to help regulate yourself? I just keep trying to make myself be calm, and this too shall pass. And even with this, you can still find a way to connect. Like even if it's a silly background or anything, like just find some way to connect.
Yeah, and Sarah, we in education think of we need to be tough and we need to tough these things out. And the more, can anyone hear me? Because everyone looks frozen. Uh-oh.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. The more
Yeah, I can
that's
hear you.
thrown, the more that's thrown at us, the more that we we all have strong resilience, but we also need to learn to take care of ourselves as well. Anyone else want to share about the last time they experienced stress?
Same deal with the pandemic. We have to learn new programs. Like at the high school, we had to learn Canvas, ingenuity, all those programs that the student had to work with. And in order for us to be able to help them, we have to know that. So we were sitting hours and hours for weeks. Because yeah, the time that we had to learn it, I'm not smart enough or intelligent that I can just read something and it'll stay there forever. So I had to, read, understand, and then, try to put it into practice. So it was very stressful. A lot of shoulder and neck pain, headaches. So yes, it was, my body was not feeling that.
Yeah, and it caused pain in your neck. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I was going to say you are smart enough, but that when and we'll get to this later, but when you're in a state of stress, those things that come naturally to us or easily, or we think we should know it, more of our brain to think about those things. Like I was thinking about, as you said that, about even the simplest thing is remembering to bring your lunch to work, because we didn't have to pack it over the pandemic, right? A lot of us were working from home. And then switching to packing the lunch again, forgetting about that. So stress can cause you to forget a lot of things. So thanks for sharing that, Jose. It's not because you're not intelligent. It's because we were going through some stressful times.
Yeah, I have forgotten my coffee twice.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean you're not intelligent. So for the next slide, Cassie. So talking about resilience, because as we've all experienced stress during this challenging time, and all of our students will have experienced stress during this challenging time, we need to focus on building our resiliency skills. So there are certain factors that help us mitigate those. So having a sense of control, a sense of purpose, connection, which we've already talked about. The social emotional skills, particularly the self-awareness and the self-management. And then we're going to talk about coping skills, having optimism and flexibility and adaptability that all blend into what Cassie was talking about earlier. So they all fit nicely with that. So what I'd like us to do is I'm going to put a link in the chat. Oh, you already did it right before me.
Holly, I gotcha.
Yes. I was ready with it. So you're going to click on this link and it should force you to make a copy. And once you've made a copy, we're going to rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being I never do this, and 4, I often do this. So we're going to rate ourselves on this scale. So I want you to work through and rate yourself from 1 to 4 in all of the areas.
Holly, do you want to share your screen with the document or?
Pull that up. I was just thinking that. It's funny.
Mine's saying I need access to it.
Okay, let's.
Hang on 1 second. It should work now.
Is that Leah? No.
So working for everybody now? Try refreshing because I did make I think between Holly and I, we made everybody editors.
I did make. And I could put the link in again.
Okay. How's it working now?
We get in. And let me know when you've completed the assessment, please. That's not one. And how about if we stop after the relationship section? Jose, you were muted, so I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Where do I go to be able to check those numbers?
You just have to highlight them, unfortunately. So, or
Okay.
find a way to do that. We tried
Oh,
to,
I see. Okay.
we were going to be in person and then we pivoted at the last moment. So
It also
we'll just,
print it out at a different time, right? And do it as well.
and circle it. And so we'll just give another moment and then we'll, as you've read through them, we'll progress through the questions. So Cassie, we want to go to the next slide. So as we're filling this out or as we're reading it, what is the process of completing the assessment like for you? What is it like for you? Or what surprised you the most about this and why? Or what was your greatest strength or an area to focus on? What's coming to mind for you, Sarah or Jose, or I'm sorry, I don't should know your name, in Ms. Schott's room?
I apologize. I had to step away for a second, so I'm still working through it.
Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, we'll stop and then we can complete it later. So as we're working through it, what's coming to mind for you?
I think for me, it's just a lot of stuff to process.
There's a lot of stuff to process. What about you, Jose?
Can you repeat the question?
What's this? What has this been like for you, or what's surprising to you as you're filling this out, and why, and what might be your greatest strength or area that you need to focus on?
I think the area where I need to focus on more is that sleeping part. Yes.
That's a big one.
Yes. The physical self-care is, yeah, I need to make those changes to get more sleep hours. So that's one of the ones that I will probably focus more. And taking time off. Not really.
What would you say is your greatest strength, Jose?
My
so
greatest
far?
strength, I think, patience.
It's a great one.
Yes, I am.
What about you, Sarah? Oh, sorry, Jose.
No, I am very patient.
I would say probably flexibility is one of my biggest strengths, because with the students I work with, they could be anywhere from a 504 to an IEP to very extended to nonverbal to verbal. So like always being flexible with whatever audience you have.
Yeah, flexibility. And what's an area you need to focus more on?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm super great at being mom, and I'm super great at being, in my field. But as far as working those same tasks in myself, that's at 41 years old, that's a work in progress.
Yep. I hear that. I hear that. For sure. Okay, and you can come back to this at your own and then and fill this out and circle it because we realized that there's a lot to it. So one of the things that helps us with all the stressors and what Cassie talked about, trauma sensitive schools, is the benefits of systematic social emotional learning. And a few of us touched upon the times that we build it into our day, but really we want to think about it, building it into all parts of our day, from the people who work in the cafeteria, to the custodian, to the bus driver, to the classroom educator, to the building administrator, all the way up to the superintendent. So it starts with that, and the benefits are huge. So one of the largest benefits is the well-being of yourself, and then also the students that you work with. There's also an increase in instructional time. A lot of people believe that if they spend time on building these social emotional learning skills, that it takes away from the classroom instruction time, whereas the opposite is true. If you put in the effort up front, you will not have as many behaviors occurring where you have to stop your lessons to constantly put out fires. There is less time managing behaviors, and then stress and burnout. There's less stress and burnout. I want you to just read these to yourself. And we've all seen many initiatives come and go. I've been in education for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of things come and go, many of which are not supported by administration or not supported by funding. And so what we want to think of as social emotional learning is not being another initiative. It's the lever to build connections. So it's something that you do from the start. And it's often, as Cassie touched upon, it's often seen as the work of the counselor or the mental health professional. And really, I can't send kids or both kids and adults out of my classroom in order to build those connections. So what I want you to think about is, what do you want your schools to sound like, look like, and feel like? In your ideal world, what would you want them to look like, sound like, and feel like?
A safer place for students.
Love that, Jose.
A comfortable, welcoming environment.
Love that too, Sarah. What else? What else comes to mind? What would it sound like?
Not too distracting, which is hard to say.
What would it sound like to you, Jose, if you walked into a building? How would we know?
How do you know? Just by the you know, like the face of the school. Who would that be? You know, the person that welcomes you and say, good morning, how are you? Or, you know, the smile on the person that is the one greeting.
Yeah, it would look like someone greeting you at the door and welcoming you in, instead of someone in the extreme cases where students are late, coming to the front office, and the first thing they hear is, why are you late, right? So instead of, the flip of that is, so glad you're here,
Yes.
right?
I'm
So
glad
if you
you
hear
made it.
that, so glad you're here, so glad you arrived today, rather than, why are you late? Right? It changes that whole child or young adult's day. So
Yeah.
just those simple words. And then you can figure out why they're late. But that welcoming part at the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not
Yeah.
making, you know, what's that say when a tree fell down And then everybody tried to make burning wood from it, right? You know, like chop it down after being downed.
Mhm. Exactly, right? You're chopping someone down after being down, and chances are, like for most of our students, and I'm not talking about high school students, but our middle school students or our elementary school students, chances are they are not late because of themselves. It's something that's happened at home, right?
Yeah.
It's out of their control.
Yes.
So, and then we blame we tend to, and I'm not saying that you do, but in education, we tend to blame the child.
Mhm.
And that's not in their locus of control, right? They're not in control of that. It's whoever their caregiver is and when they're getting them to school.
Exactly.
Thanks, Cassie. Sorry, go ahead, Jose.
No, I said exactly. That's correct.
So I would like you to read this definition of social emotional learning. And it's a long one. And as you're reading it, I want you to think of a phrase or a word or a sentence that stands out to you.
I think acquire would be the word that I kind of see. Because you have to know that these are skills that have to be built and trust has to be established. And it has to have this whole process. Not like, here's the information, here you go. If you take it and you have to acquire their trust, you have to acquire their attention, you have to get them to buy into what you're into, and the big process. And then, but in the end, it empowers them more so because they can control their emotions. Like adults like me, like we weren't taught those things when we were younger. And now we're adults, we're trying to catch up on all stuff that, man, if I had just known this, if I had just known that.
Love that. Love all of what you just said, Sarah, right? And so, yeah, we weren't taught these things. We were just expected to know them, right? And get along with others, right? Get along with others.
And I
So,
have a daughter who just
yeah, go ahead.
I have a daughter who just turned 21 and she was diagnosed ADHD. And she's very, very, very intelligent when she was younger. She scored high, but she just was always never really fit in. Well, at 21 years old, she's been diagnosed with autism, which had I known those different things, raising her would be in a different process. So like, I feel like I may have caused some damage with, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you, or these different things. Had I known,
Right.
had I acquired that knowledge, I would have known how to do things differently.
Well, right, you know more now, and we didn't know, right? And so you are doing the best with what you know. Jose, what stands out for you?
You're muted, Jose.
My goodness, I clicked on it and still not. Oh, trusting and collaborative relationships. It's in the middle of the second paragraph or second.
Trusting and collaborative relationships. Everything about social emotional learning is housed in that relationship. All right. And if students don't feel connected and don't have those relationships, then they can't have the social emotional learning doesn't occur. And even with adults too. So you have to feel trusted and safe. So as you said, you want to create those healthy environments.
Mhm.
One of the things that just comes from CASEL, which is the Collaborative of Academic and Social Emotional Learning, and they are really the gold standard of social emotional learning. And this is their definition, and it's quite broad. But what sticks out is the explicit commitment to equity and excellence. And it emphasizes identity, agency, and belonging. And so you called out a lot of those things already in what you said. And it highlights spaces and places. And on the next slide, Cassie, we can look at that. Cassie's the slide person, where social emotional learning can be promoted. So both in the community with families and caregivers, in the schools and the classrooms. And it speaks to the need to infuse social emotional learning into instruction and support services as well. So it can't be something that we do on a Monday morning only every other week. So it's something that needs to be built into the day, and teaching students how to self-regulate, for example, that needs to be taught throughout the day. And it reflects the role of ongoing assessment for continuous improvement. Another things that we want to highlight is that social emotional learning, this new definition, highlights current research. And I already talked about the connection with equity. So what are ways that we might, so I want you to take a look at these competencies. There's self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, thanks, Cassie, relationship skills, and social awareness. I want you to highlight which area, and maybe we could use the reaction tools. Do you know how to use the stampers to use the reaction tools? Do you have access to that? I want you to put a star by the one where you feel the most, you feel that you have the most skills.
Should be able to find the annotate button at the top of your screen. And then it gives you an option to stamp. It gives you a toolbar. And you can pick an option to stamp a star on the screen. Are you able to find that?
They might
Oh,
not
we-
have the latest Zoom.
Think you have to allow the annotate first before we can do it?
Okay.
Okay, so let's just identify if we feel comfortable, Jose or Sarah, where do you feel is your biggest strength? In which of these areas?
I would say relationship skills for myself. 90% of my job.
Yeah, for me will be self-management and then relationship skills.
Okay. And where, if you feel comfortable, where is an area that you could use more growth?
Relationship skills.
I think self-management.
Thank you for being so open and honest. We all have things to work on, and my self-management, especially with my middle school. Well, now I have 2 middle schoolers, but the oldest middle schooler, right? I'm always constantly reflecting upon myself. So thanks for sharing those. In addition, these are lifetime skills. As Sarah, you mentioned, they're not something that happens in kindergarten and then we're done, right? So we're constantly learning and growing.
Well, that's the goal. And 16 years from now, we'll be able to see the real effects of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
I point something out, Holly.
I was going to ask you if you had anything to share.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that Sarah, your strength was relationship skills, and Jose said self-management. And then you both said the opposite of area that you could work on. So just kind of highlighting, right, that we can, not to say that you need to build a relationship around helping each other with those skills, but just recognizing that our colleagues, we can help support our colleagues in developing these skills, and they can help support us in different ways. And so, kind of putting that out there can be really meaningful for groups of people working together.
Thanks, Cassie. Next slide. So there are a couple of different ways that stand out in how you develop these skills, the social emotional learning skills. One is that's to be explicit. Again, Sarah, you hit the nail on the head when we say these things are not just learned, right? We don't pick them up by just being around it, but it's part of it by modeling it. But those skills need to be taught And Cassie said, just as we would teach math skills as well. Another thing is you're here, professional development. So really opening the door and allowing time for people to reflect upon social emotional learning and the integration with content and curriculum. So one of the things that we think about, Jose, in secondary is how can you use like characters in books that you're reading about to develop these skills as well, and then cultivate a sense of belonging and community. We want everyone, including adults that work in the building, to feel like they belong.
So you were asking me how would I apply it to?
Sure.
That's a hard question, but I guess modeling all those characters that gives positive way of thinking.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I would say for me, like I created my office to be a fun place because I know that when I'm first meeting with students, it makes them really nervous. So I'm a big comic book nerd. So my office is all Justice League and I discuss about teamwork. And if they're uncomfortable with me, I'm very tall. I'm 6'2". So I can come
Wow.
across really intimidating. So I really have to go above and beyond to create that, like, whoa. So usually a talking point could be about my height. That would just be a way to get people talking, or having the silly stuff on my walls in my office could be a talking point. So like creating that environment to get them comfortable before you start talking about business.
Absolutely. So you're building those relationships and you're creating those spaces for connections, Sarah. So that's awesome. And you're self-aware to know that your height, right? You could be.
Well, I'm the short one in my family, so I'm completely aware of my height. My baby brother's 6'9".
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have 3 little big brothers, so.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about the ideal for a systematic social emotional learning program, there are a lot of components that go into it. So when Cassie and I have been talking to a lot of schools and a lot of districts about what they're doing, and a lot of them are doing pieces and parts, which is okay. But a lot of them are doing many different things and hoping that there's a magic cure out there. So the magic is you are the magic in the connection. But when we talk about the ideal social emotional learning program, we want to ensure that it is it's aligned to some standards. And what the neat part is that the WESD is helping to build out social emotional learning standards so that we know where we are headed and we all have a common language. I already have hit home that we need to embed it into our daily practices and the PD. Another way is to support staff through coaching and mentoring. And your district, and then Cassie and I are also here to help with that coaching piece and the mentoring piece. Another thing is to use a quality social emotional learning assessment. We need to know where children are in order to know where to instruct them. Otherwise, we are assuming, or we are teaching the same thing assuming that every student needs the same thing, and focusing on adults, and then knowing that we're always not going to get it right, but we're going to plan something. We're going to plan to try something. We're going to do it. And then we're going to study it. Did it work? Did it not work? Did it work partially? Why did it work? Or why didn't it work? And then we are going to change it up and try something new. We will not be perfect. It will not get to every student and every adult. So we've got to try something in order to make any progress, if that makes sense. What questions do you have so far?
When you say adults, are you just talking about teachers or school staff, or are you including the parents of the students?
Yeah, Jose, that is all of the above. And one thing that we do a lot is not educate parents. So again, we were not taught these things when we were younger. And so we can't expect parents and families or caregivers to have these skills as well. So things that we do inside the classroom walls or school walls, we need to have families as partners in that work. So absolutely, Jose. Yes to all of the above. So there's some critical practices about what we can do right now. One is to build and deepen relationships and build partnerships, because we cannot do this work alone. We need each other. Like you said, Jose, we need our families. We also need our community partners in this work. And then we need to plan for all of those things to happen. Another thing is to create opportunities for us to heal and connect and build relationships. So how can you intentionally build in that time during the day for students to talk to one another or adults to talk to one another? Some of our students have not seen each other for a year and a half. So what is that going to look like? We need to focus on building those relationships, and it needs to be intentional, and also with adults. And we need to create those safe environments for all students. And then using data for improvement. So let's think about, what data are you currently collecting on students? And what would your ideal be? What would you want to have?
What do you mean by that question? What data are we currently taking on the students?
Yeah, so what data do you currently have on students? Like, for example, are you looking at attendance data? Or are you looking at anecdotal records where, Holly is shutting down every day after lunch? Or what, those are sources of data.
Well, I'm not currently looking at any data that.
Okay. It's fair enough,
I
Sarah.
will be
Fair
reviewing
enough.
IEPs and things like that, but when I was a
And
director,
you have the IEP, right?
yeah. When I was a director at a different school, I would look when students came in and they were having a problem. I would always look at what was causing their problem. Was it the specific instructor they had? Was it the day of the week? Was it the morning? Was it because they were late for their kids getting to school? And this was like 5 years ago when they didn't really look at all that stuff like they are really looking into it now. So it really makes a big difference when you can kind of stop and get to know that student and know what's causing them, because then if they're running late or whatever else, it's almost like a stress off their shoulder. Not that you're going to not mark them tardy or absent, but that way you're going to kind of understand and talk with them about it versus, oh man, you're late again.
Right. I love that, Sarah. So time of day, all of those things will be sources of data. Jose, what about you? At the
Well,
high
I can give
school?
an example for now. I participated in the summer school on both sessions, because we had one session June 22nd through July 2nd, and then August 2nd through the 19th. And we were just looking at the attendance. It was very low. So
Yeah, it's low. So
very
you,
low.
yeah, you can look at things like attendance data and then see, like Sarah said, when is it happening? Why is it happening, etc. Though
Yeah.
that's would be the second layer.
Mhm.
And then at the optimal, you would want to have a social emotional learning assessment in place, because then you could look at, for example, there's children's competencies, because then I know where to instruct. I need to build my instruction plan around what my students know and what they need to know.
Mhm. Yes. So we had every day we had a question of the day or a game of the day, And those were to, build up relationship in between the students. And sometimes we had questions like, I used to say, look, today the questions are these two. However, I'll give you this opportunity for you to ask a question, any kind of question, as long as it is within, respecting others. And so that way they would share about their families, their friends, things that they enjoy in their life, and that was able to get them out of their negative mentality or their negative me, and so I guess that created more, bonding in between them, and of course with me too, because I share my some of my ideas or experiences.
Absolutely. You shared yourself. So,
Yeah.
so your students want to know about you as a human, right?
Mhm.
If you're just the teacher and you're not a human, you don't have that
Yes.
connection. The teacher doesn't sleep in the classroom. That's what elementary students used to think of me, that I used to sleep in the classroom. Bessie, did you have anything to share? It looks like you were going to say something.
No, I think you all covered it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So again, we've talked about the positive, stable adults as the bringing it back is the single most effective thing that you can have. And one of the ways to do that is to create a relationship map. So you're taking every student in your building and you're identifying by each student who has a relationship with whom. So if a student has a relationship with at least one adult, you'd put a green dot. If a student that you're worried about, you'd put a different color dot. And that student could have a relationship with somebody, but there also could be students that need extra relationships. So they might benefit from having more than one connection, and then intentionally planning for everyone to have a positive relationship. I think those are out of order for some reason. So that Cassie mentioned that we were going to talk about the 3 signature social emotional learning practices, and that's a welcoming activity where you welcome or you have a question, like you said, Jose, that allows people to connect with one another. And then you'd also have engaging strategies. So something that they can do besides just listen to you, and then always have an optimistic closure. And we'll have one of those at the end, because you want to ensure that you are providing an ending, but also something that is not negative. So something that students can count on to look forward to the next day. So such as, I'm really looking forward to, or something that went well today. So you're focusing on the positive. So Cassie, in the interest of time, it's a 7-minute video. So we're going to talk a little bit about RULER, which stands for regulating, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. And I talked about CASTLE, and this is one of their select programs, which means it's the top tier. And the reason being is that it involves all the stakeholders. And Jose, you talked about who are those stakeholders. That's families and communities, and also administrators and teachers, anyone that is connected to that school environment. It's also built on emotional intelligence and systems theory, and it focuses on the positive development. It is used in addition to behavior support programs. So Sarah, it sounds like you're working a lot with students that might have behavior support programs. So this would be used as your tier 1. And then that your behavior support would be that tier 2. It's integrated into all of those content areas as we talked about it, that's critical. And it allows teachers to be the most effective that they can be because they are focused on the wholeness of both themselves and their students. And the biggest one is it reduces what we call problem behavior and anxiety and depression in both adults and children. And we always want to know that it boosts academics. And it helps to change the school climate where everyone feels safe connection. So why do emotions matter? Why are they important?
They set the tone.
Set the tone, Sarah. I love the way you said that.
Yeah, besides setting the tone, well, actually they can, they will affect other people.
Yes. Your emotions affect other people. Absolutely.
Yes.
Why do emotions matter to you?
I think because we all have emotions, and if we can learn about them, it makes our lives a lot easier. Makes everyone around us a lot easier to deal with, as well as ourselves.
Yes. We're only human, and we all depend on each other.
Yeah, you both are awesome. That's absolutely right. For all of those reasons. And then the last question about emotions is, how do emotions play out in your daily life?
They set the tone. Like, it depends upon how your day goes. I have a son with ADHD, oppositional defiance, and explosive. So depending on how that day starts, it sets the emotional roller coaster for that entire day.
To a certain point, I agree with,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
to a certain point, I agree with her, with Sarah. But you know, what happens at home stays at home. You come to work and you know you put your best effort, your best face, and when you go back home, same deal.
For some reason, my internet froze.
Your work stays at work, and you know it's a fluctuating emotional skills that we have to develop. I don't know if you heard me.
I did, and you are both correct. So what happens is your emotions do set the tone for the day. But Jose, you're talking about being able to self-regulate and finding a strategy to when you enter the workplace, you've switched to your more positive emotions so that you're more able to, well, for lack of better terms, deal with whatever comes your way.
Yeah.
However, sometimes I can't shut it off, and I bring to, and not everyone's as self-regulated as you are, Jose. You bring to school, and I'm talking about adults and children, with what has happened in the morning. So for instance, if I'm yelling at my son to get his stuff together, right, he's heard me yelling and that's how he starts his day. So when he comes to school, he has that with him already.
Yes.
So does he have the skills, or how does he handle that in order to meet the rest of the day? So you are both correct. And so what we want to do is help students learn how to, and adults, how to handle their emotions so that they can go on with the rest of the day.
Yes.
So, Cassie, we're gonna go to the last closing circle. Well, sorry, we get one more before it, because I want to go back to the self-care as taking care of yourself first. So in that self-care assessment, at the bottom of it is creating a self-care plan. So what can you do in times when you are stressed or you have those negative emotions that you're bringing to work or your students might bring to work? So I want you to think about things that you're already doing for self-care, and self-care isn't selfish. It's so that you are able to, you can be what we call your best self. And then pick one of those things that you'd like to try next month. And then Cassie, I think it's on the next slide. Or this, maybe it's the slide before. Which is the
Are
one.
you saying
There we
pick
go.
something from the self-care plan?
So here is something that this is what I wanted her to go to, which is the self-care plan. So it's something like breathing or making sure, Jose, that you might get enough sleep, for example, going to bed early. I might decide to reward myself with a hot cup of hot chocolate every Friday. What's something that you can do in the next month? I might decide to journal. I might decide to spend more time outdoors. I might schedule time with my loved one, with my youngest child, just one-on-one time, for example, all of those things. So those would just be some examples. So we want to learn to take care of ourselves first. So what comes to mind for both of you?
I think all the things you just said sound really good. Ditto.
Those are just off the top of my head, Sarah, all the things that I could be working on or doing, right?
I have a son that's going to be a freshman this year. So, like making that one-on-one time or, he just spent a week with my mom. My mom's here now. She just drove him down from Washington to make sure they had that one-on-one time because soon they'll be grown up. So yeah, focusing on yourself is super important. And then he's been gone for 4 days and I've done like nothing but what I want to do. Well, besides work, but yeah.
Yeah. Jose, what about you? What's something that you can try in the next month to take care of yourself? And remember, it's not selfish, it's self-full.
Yeah. Well, I guess breathe and reevaluate everything I have done that have given me satisfaction. So love myself and read good books like this one, Culturize. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see it.
Yeah, so that helps me I guess reevaluate my own doing and try to do better.
Absolutely. Reading is a great way. So now, Cassie, let's go to the closing circle. This is a signature SEL practice. So one thing that you're taking away from our time today is, what's something that you're taking away from our time together?
One thing that I'm taking from this is that we're not by ourselves. We have somebody that is, putting our shoulders, guiding us through difficult times, and, doing what we are basically doing with our students. That's something that I am grateful for.
Say you're going to make me cry, right?
No.
And we want you to feel supported. And that's both Cassie and my role, is that you are not alone, right? And sometimes we feel like we are alone. And you also have a wonderful community in your school district as well. So remember that we are leaning on each other and to lean on each other, because again, we have that as educators, that superhero mentality. I can do it, but we all need each other. What about you, Sarah?
Sorry, I'm laughing at my dog over here. I think one quote that was on there was be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Do what you can to bring the temperature down. That's sort of like a really eye-opening statement because you really realize that when someone comes to you all hot heavy, you have to be extra cool to bring them down, you know. And same the vice versa. If you're trying to engage your student and they're like very, very cold and not wanting to engage, you're going to try to bring your temperature up to try to engage them. So I think that was a really cool
Yeah,
statement and just like a cool visual because you can like actually picture it.
I love that. And I've used it too. So it is a cool visual. So I love that, Cassie. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Awesome.
So
And anything
remember the
else?
movie Pay It Forward?
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, you are, and you're awesome. Cassie, do you want to add anything?
No, I think it's been a real joy to spend time with you this afternoon. We do have a quick survey. If you could help us by, if you have a device, scanning it with the scanning the QR code with your phone and answering some it's a short survey, that would be super, super helpful. But we just wish you the best of luck in your start of the school year and all of the challenges that you're facing. Remember to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And we really appreciate the time.
We are also here to help support you. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions, or, you know, nothing is silly or small. So we're happy to help. And we have a team that supports us as well. So.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, Holly, but our services for districts are completely free. So you don't have to worry about accessing special services to reach out to us. We're always available if you would like to consult.
How do we find out what additional trainings you guys have?
It's a good question. So Sarah, we're building something, is this thing called it's called PD Networks, so that it should be available for anyone to come and search and find it by topic what we have available. So that's coming. And then both Cassie and I have various networks that are coming and they're ongoing, and we'd love to have anybody join and be a part of that. So we will add your name to our listservs, not our list. We don't have listservs. We just have lists. So I make it sound so fancy, but it's really not.
Yeah.
And we can let you know, and then you could join or not join whenever you're available. But we would love we would love that.
Yeah, we're also on the WESD website, though, you know, full transparency, that website can be daunting to dig through to find what you need. So your best bet is usually just to, if you're interested, shoot us an email and just say, hey, do you have anything offered? And we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We just expanded our team with 7 more specialists on board. And so part of what we're doing is really building the infrastructure to be able to provide more training. If there's something that you want to see that hasn't been offered, email that to us, because we would love to provide you what you need rather than us guessing. So